how cool is this pen holder? Dark bleatings, everyone. Today I'm going to be giving you some author and book recommendations for 5 different types of horror. So all of these sort of categories of books are going to be like really different from the next one, and the authors, I've tried to put together a mix of authors that all write really differently to each other as well, so that there is variation within the categories. So the first category we're doing because I have mentioned these authors, all the ones I'm going to give you here, and I have 4 of them, and they fall into this first category, but I talked about them quite a bit, so I'm not going to talk about them too much. I will link the other videos I've talked about them in if you want a bit more information in the description, if you're interested in any of these and you want a bit more. But we're going with character driven and covers lots of subgenres. So this is an author recommendation list for authors who do really good protagonists, relationships and characters, and also seem to just write under every horror subgenre imaginable so far for their careers. So we'll start with, and I talked about Gemma Amor a lot, but Gemma Amor. So very briefly, one of her newest books, or the newest I think, The Folly. This is a sort of gothic ghosty horror set in a sort of seaside-y location, and it's very spooky. And then we've got Dear Laura, a novella about a girl whose friend went missing when they were kids, never to be seen again, but every year on her birthday this girl receives a letter from someone who claims to be the kidnapper and is feeding her just tiny bits of information about her friend in exchange for something else. It's quite upsetting to read, but it's a really good read. But this is completely different from The Folly. This isn't extreme horror by any means, but the subject matter is really upsetting, and this is definitely more psychological, but like real world psychological kind of horror. And then we have a sort of sci-fi, a supernatural sci-fi story around mental health, particularly postnatal depression, suicidal ideation. This is about a woman, this is full immersion, sorry. This is about a woman who undergoes an experimental new kind of treatment, and she's absolutely desperate because nothing else therapy-wise or medication or anything has worked for her. She's suffering very severely with depression, postnatal depression, and you know, that kind of thing. And I kind of generally hate stories that center around mental health, because more often than not I find that the mental health aspects aren't done very authentically, or even insultingly a lot. But this, I don't know, there was something really special about this one, and it's really well written and lots of surprises. So yeah, Gemma Amor, someone who seems to go into a completely different branch of horror every time she releases a book, but every book she puts out is great. And then next, for brilliant character driven stories, covering a lot of bases with the subgenres, we've got McGrath, who I talked about to death last year. So I would start as a good starting place. My personal favorite is The Women in the Woods, which is about a mother and son who get lost in the woods, and they find a kind of tiny commune of people. And this is for sure very folk horror-esque, very culty. It could be real world, it could be supernatural, I shan't spoil that for you, but this is very character driven and very engaging. And then completely different kind of story, but again with the amazing character work. This is one that spans a big section of time. We're going back and forth, and this is about a group of friends, and something happens, and maybe they meet up later, and you know, I don't really want to give anything about it away. I have a lot of McGrath books, but these are the 2 that I would start with if you're new to McGrath. Criminally underrated. Well, actually, the people who read McGrath rate her very highly, but I just feel like she's underread. Like, not enough people have found her stuff yet. And then we've got Rachel Harrison, and I will skim over quickly, obviously, because I've talked about Rachel Harrison a lot. In fact, I have interviewed McGrath, and I've also interviewed Rachel Harrison on this channel, and I will link those interviews below for you if you're interested as well. But Rachel Harrison, I think there are so many great authors that are amazing at character work, but I really think that hands down Rachel Harrison is the best author working in horror for brilliantly fleshed out protagonists and relationships and everything. And Rachel Harrison's general style is a little bit more cozy, so definitely still horror, but it doesn't tend to leave you feeling you know, dead inside or anything. And she's covered so many subgenres. So we've got Black Sheep, which is the book that I discovered Rachel on. This is a sort of religious horror about a woman who had to leave home because her community is super religious, and basically if you kind of fall out with the religion and you don't believe it, you're kind of out of the community. So she's gone, and then something happens a few years later, she has cause to return, and you know, chaos ensues. And then the next book I read of Rachel Harrison's is Werewolves, Sharp Teeth. This is about a great sibling relationship, and I always love her protagonist. She's so strong at character work. And then So Thirsty, once again, an amazing female friendship. This is vampires, as you can probably tell. I know that Rachel has also done witches, but I haven't read that book yet. But yeah, Rachel Harrison hits all of the really great sort of more commercial subgenres, and I don't mean commercial in a bad way. We're talking, you know, vampires, werewolves, you know, culty kind of stuff, but she hits those sort of more commercial horror subgenres, but in a different way than we're used to seeing every time. So that's why I really love her work. And the next one, I don't have physical books to show you, I just had ebooks of these, but Erica Summers, and she, if you saw my sort of like wrap up of the year, she was my favorite creator of the year last year, favorite author of the year. She is always incredible with characters. You're always so on board with them immediately. And she has written an apocalyptic horror story, like a biblical apocalypse story called Mantis. She's got a body horror novella that's more sort of like parasite and squirmy things that she co-wrote called Writhe. She's got another body horror, but this was more sort of like almost medical sci-fi. That one was called Vanity Kills. Honestly, and then she wrote this the first thing I ever read by her, I realized the other day, was called Bad God's Tower, and it was this funny little, I say funny, she is quite funny. Also, she writes very good comedy, very dark, humorous kind of stuff. But yeah, she wrote this little novella called Bad God's Tower, and it was like a yee-haw sort of western crime horror. She will do it all. Let's move on to our next section. I've tried not to go too typical with the types of horror we're talking. I was tempted to do vampires, ghosts, zombies, etc. I thought I'd go a little bit more specific, but I will make a more generalized video probably next week. But now we're going books that infuse mythology. So two of my favorites are The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Core. This was my first Cassandra Core book, and I'm looking forward to reading more from them. So The Salt Grows Heavy, let me show you the cover here. So I had no idea what I was getting in for. This is a novella, and this infuses, I don't want to spoil it for you actually, because the mythology it uses is sort of a surprise, but way darker than I would expect for the creature that's used here. And it felt really cold, like it's a good winter read, I would say, because this made me feel all icy and cold. But yeah, just a great piece of writing that, and I was googling the mythology to see how much exists and how much was just invented by Cassandra, but it, you know, borrowed from lots of culture, I think, like to just sort of meshed a lot of really great different things together to create this like horrible horror whole. Let's move on before I say anything else really weird. Then we've got Pomegranates by Priya Sharma. Now, this is more on the quiet side of horror, so, I guess, no, I wouldn't say this is quiet horror, but definitely kind of mystical. This infuses Greek mythology, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a little while since I read it, but, you know, it uses figures from mythology that we all have heard of and know and love, and it against a backdrop of an apocalypse, and we're changing viewpoints. There's also some sort of like Greek theatre style here. There are chorus sections and things like that. So this infused not only mythology but different cultural theatrical styles meshed into prose, which I've never seen before, and I really enjoyed it. So these two, I would say, are really, really different. If you like to go a bit out of the box with your horror, and if you like something a little bit more poetic, maybe, you know, if you really enjoy like beautiful writing, I think that these two also fall into that kind of category. So wholeheartedly recommend these. Okay, next, let's move on to extreme horror. And you all know extreme horror is not really my forte. However, I have been trying to be a bit braver dipping into it. So let's go with Judith Sonnet first. You don't do extreme horror if you're not reading Judith Sonnet. I've got No One Writes for Free. So I have to say, with this category of books, if you are unfamiliar with extreme horror, do not start with Judith Sonnet. Like, if you want to ease your way in, Judith Sonnet is not the author to do that with, as I found out when I picked up my first few extreme horror books. Thanks to the Books of Horror group on Facebook. I asked for recommendations. I don't think I specified please go light on me because I haven't read it before, but this is brutal. This is about a woman who's driving her son and daughter across the country, and then while she's getting gas, I don't know why I did that accent, while she's stopped for petrol, a guy gets in the back of the car, and then when she gets back and starts driving, it's like unbeknownst to her that he's there, and absolutely horrible things happen. So if you like extreme horror and you haven't read this, it's a classic. We also have, sorry, I don't have physical books to show you for this, C.V. Hunt, author of Meat Photo and Horrorama. So C.V. Hunt is a good author for extreme horror if you like your extreme horror and the grisliness with a side of sometimes funny, sometimes nostalgic. I was an 80s baby, so CV's work, there's a lot of familiar stuff in there that I kind of like know and love, and you know, I guess I am kind of set in my old ways. I love it when authors use things that, you know, aren't typical today. Covers kind of a range of topics and themes and everything as well. So C.V. Hunt is popular with extreme horror readers. And then the last one I have for you, and this is if you want to be traumatized, Suffer the Flesh by Monica O'Rourke. And that's all I'm saying about that one. But yeah, like I said, I can't stress enough, don't pick up any of these authors if you're dipping your toe into extreme horror. These are for people who are already in, okay? Next category, I've got two for you here. So these are some book recommendations for contemporary pregnancy horror. So the one that always comes up if you talk pregnancy horror for good reason, I guess, is Rosemary's Baby, but there are others. So I would like to suggest Sealed by Naomi Booth. Now, some people have criticisms of this with the Aussie slang and stuff. There are people criticizing, because I don't think that Naomi is an Aussie writer, and I think that people were complaining that her slang was a bit off and stuff, but I didn't know that when I read it because I'm from the UK, so I didn't know. But this is an apocalyptic story about there's a sort of disease or a virus outbreak, and it's really, really unique. I can't remember what it's called, but basically it causes, like, any orifice on your body, like, skin will grow over it, and obviously depending on where it grows, that could be a problem. So people are losing their sight, their hearing, the ability to speak and eat. That's a major problem. And our protagonist is a pregnant lady who's trying to avoid catching this ailment. Have a think about why the orifices being inaccessible might be an issue for someone who's going to give birth soon. It's I mean, I don't think this is a perfect story, but this is really unique and definitely one of the more unique pregnancy horrors I've ever read. And then I've got A Delicate Condition by Danielle Valentine. A lot of people might have already heard of this because there was American Horror Story season that was based on this book called Delicate, a recent one. I think it was the most recent one actually. So starring Emma Roberts and Kim Kardashian, which begrudges me to say this, but she was not out of place. I thought she was really good actually, quite the scene stealer if you ask me. But anyway, A Delicate Edition is written in the first person. It does have Rosemary's Baby vibes because the protagonist is basically just getting talked over and dismissed and ignored for all of her concerns, and you know, her husband is the one that the doctor kind of talks to. We've got a lot of those kinds of themes in there, but it is not Rosemary's Baby. And I should say, if you've seen the American Horror Story season, the book is very different. Like the American Horror Story season adaptation does follow the book, but only to a point, not even halfway, I'd say, and then it American Horror Storied it, if that makes sense. Completely different direction in the book, very, very surprising conclusion, and I really enjoyed it. Initially, I wasn't sure if I liked the writing style, or if it was the writing style or the character I wasn't sure about, but the more you go into it, like, yeah, the better it gets. So those would be my recommendations for that. Lastly, got two writers, and this category is called really well written but leaves you feeling dead inside. So if you're the kind of person who enjoys your horror with bleakness, I would not all the time, but I've got this is an author recommendation and a book recommendation. So first up, I've got Penny Jones, and the book I'm suggesting is Suffer Little Children. So this is one of the Black Shuck Books Shadows collection books, number 13, and this was the first Penny Jones I read, and I have been referring to Penny, who in real life is a lovely, sweet, wonderful, funny woman, but I have been referring to her as a straight up savage since I read this, because these Shadows books are themed, and the author picks the theme, and then there'll be some sort of current through the stories or something that links them, or like, you know, an overarching kind of like subgenre or something like that. Suffer Little Children, I didn't know if that meant like you're suffering little children or little children are suffering, etc. Penny Jones is a savage. And the last book for this video, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this properly, so enjoy me trying to say coup de grace by Sophia Adram. I'm so sorry about my pronunciation is in general for this. So I recently read this, as in about a week ago, and I closed the book and wanted to cry, and I regretted reading it and also thought it was one of the greatest things I'd ever read, and I can't unread it, but I don't want to have unread it. I'm very conflicted, okay? It's really thought-provoking, and this, oh god. Okay, so this is about a guy who is suicidal, so very heavy subject matter, and then he goes into a subway station, like an underground train station, and he kind of like can't get out of there. So this is, you know, this is very much working on metaphor and kind of, you know, like beneath the surface kind of level for the kind of story that it is with the protagonist that we have. It's very appropriate how deep this goes, like quite literally and figuratively. It's a work of art. It's not for everybody. It's definitely not going to be for everybody. So this isn't the kind of book that I would recommend to like general horror fans or anything. This is very specific niche kind of horror, but it's very well written. I thought I really couldn't put it down. It was bleak and left me feeling really cold and dead inside and miserable, and you know, like I needed to watch a really silly episode of The Inbetweeners or Taskmaster. I think that's actually what I watched, is Taskmaster, to feel better. But I mean, I guess I prefer to read books that make me feel a lot, and this one definitely made me feel a lot. Also, something happens towards the end, like as in, like for the reader, the style of the book switches up. and I don't want to tell you where it is because it was actually a very joyful surprise when I got there. I was really shocked. I haven't seen this. So annoying that I can't really tell you without spoiling you, but it's the kind of literary technique that you never see in books like this, and in fact are usually sort of like designated to one specific type of book. So something really creative goes on towards the end of this, and I really appreciated it. So yes, I would recommend it, but don't read this if you want something light and frothy. If you want something that, you know, has sort of like serious themes but leaves you feeling light and frothy, then go Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison instead. Okay, I hope that was somewhat interesting for you. I'm going to be making videos of like this ilk all month, I think, because I really had fun putting this together. Let me know if there are any categories of horror or, you know, styles that you want me to compile a list of authors or book recommendations for, like if you're really into short stories or, you know, big, massive beastie books, apocalyptic, vampires, whatever you want. Let me know what you want in the comments and I will do that in the next video. If you're watching and you haven't subscribed, subscribe, or I will use my devilish powers to make you the protagonist in your own bleak, horrible horror. We have an author interview tomorrow that I'm really excited for you to see, and if you have any authors that you would like me to interview on the channel, please let me know. I do author interviews every Sunday. I've been very, very fortunate and lucky with the people that have agreed to do this on this channel, considering that my subscriber count isn't even very high or anything, but I just find that authors are wonderful people that are willing to give me their time a lot of the time when I ask. So yeah, if you have any authors that you'd like me to interview, and anything specifically you want me to ask anybody, please also leave that in the comments for me, because I really, you know, this is all for my love of sharing authors and books with you guys, so like let me know what you want. Yeah, so I'll see you tomorrow with an author interview, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday next week. Bleed!